Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast about puberty blockers in trans youth. This is a different episode. You will not hear my voice. I was present at the recording. However, due to some mental issues surrounding my social anxiety, I was unable to verbally participate. However, I do hope you still enjoy the episode. Anna did a fantastic job recording this and running this. So, thank you very much. And please enjoy.
Welcome to Peeves and Cues, the podcast with the views about cues that peeve you. Got it right first time. Nailed it. Never doing it again. Right. I am Anna, and joining us today is the lovely Dawnfire, Twitch streamer, Twitter aficionado / shitposter.
Brilliant. Hello everyone. Very happy to be here.
And Lee is with us in at least an advisory capacity today. So, Dawnfire, first of all, thank you for joining us for this show.
You're very welcome.
You are our first guest, but today is a little bit of a special show, and this was going to fall in Pride Month. Call me one of those crazy people. I'm slightly glad it's not. One, because, you know, LGBTQIA+.
Hey, you did it.
Issues occur all year round. I started and I had a mental blank and I was like, oh God.
You got there.
You know, and I don't know. I'm one of those people who waits till after January to get a new gym membership.
Oh yeah, no, that's completely fair.
To, you know, I don't want to be one of those New Year's resolution people.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, we actually came up with this idea before Pride Month. And then it was like, it would fall in Pride Month. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be seen as one of those kind of clout chasing people who do things just because.
But does it have to fall in it though?
Yeah, and I know, and it's just the way scheduling issues came. But thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Like I said, we are having a discussion today for those who have missed our poll. And where have you been? Follow us on Twitter already if you haven't. But this is about the use of puberty blockers treating people with gender identity disorder, which is a technical term they tend to use for people who are trans youth. Yep. Now, both Lee and I are cis. So Dawnfire has very kindly agreed to come and give us her point of view as somebody from the trans community, so we're just not those awful people sitting around talking like we know what we're doing. Now this came up because, like I said, a couple of months ago, there were some articles.
There's quite a few going around.
Yeah, several states in America passing legislation trying to make the use of these particular drugs illegal. And so we wanted to discuss what people's thoughts were themselves. Should trans youth be able to access them, is how I worded it in the tweet. And we had 21 votes, which I think is our record.
That is a great number, actually.
22 I didn't vote this time. How dare I?
I don't think I voted either, to be honest.
Terrible. I think we can tell what you're going to vote.
I wonder.
And like we said, this could be slightly skewed because Lee and I are both left-leaning, and so both of our circles are, and we all know how Twitter can be. But 19 of those 21 votes were yes. So none of the no-vote people commented, so we don't know if it was religious, political, whatever. We don't know those reasons for them. But that's a pretty overwhelming majority.
Very good
That's
majority too.
90.5%, and for once, Twitter actually could add up to 100. So
For
we're
once,
happy with that.
it doesn't often do that.
It doesn't do it very often. So, right. Shut up, Anna. What are you doing with all this talking? You've got a guest. Let her speak. So where would you like to start? This is anything you would like to talk about. Your trans experience is on the table. I
Fun.
know very little about it. Obviously, we've known each other a bit, but we haven't really had a discussion about this. So
good
feel
sit
free.
down, haven't it? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm the type of person that doesn't really. I like to be asked questions, so I'm not really good at like starting.
Okay,
I'm not good at starting points. I'm just like
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'll try and see if we can kind of almost do this like a timeline. And once again, if there's anything that you don't feel comfortable about, just say, I'm not really comfortable answering that, or I'd rather not get into that, and we can move on.
Yeah, of course.
I know you said you're fairly open to talk about most things.
Yeah, I'm a pretty open person nowadays.
Some things come up, and sometimes you don't always have an answer, because not all these questions always do have an answer.
Very true. I mean, just in everyday life, things are like that. Like, I don't know how to answer that.
Exactly. But shall we start? Like I said, if we're trying to get an idea of like a timeline, and again, for some people this is a very definite thing from what I understand, and for some it's not. Did you have a point in your life where you realised you were trans, for a lack of a better term? You know, some people are like, you know, I've always felt since I was born, nothing felt right.
Yeah.
Was it?
I think so basically, I guess I can go through the sort of timeline. And for me, actually, as you said, it's a fairly linear timeline, to be honest. It was like, so I first started like sort of asking myself like a bunch of these questions around about midway through 2016, you know. It was like, I remember it was sort of at a youth group I went to in high school. And, you know, we were mucking about doing our... we did our nails and stuff like that, and it was just like a bit of fun at the time. But then I started seriously asking like myself questions. Like, I personally can't remember the questions I asked myself, but it was very those typical questions to ask yourself, like, would I be more comfortable like presenting as female? Am I like potentially trans or something like that? And it was just a bunch of like questions circling through my head constantly around about July, August. And I sat down with my friend at school one day and sort of discussed this with her. And she pretty much caught on that like I could potentially be questioning my gender pretty early on. And I was just like, yeah, that would be pretty accurate. And then it got to about late August, when I realized that, yeah, I do believe that I am transgender. I am a transgender woman.
Okay,
And
so just for the sake of clarity here, sorry, can you give us like, obviously I don't want you to completely dox yourself here, but can you give us like a rough age there so people can have an idea? Because obviously this is a podcast, they can't see you. Generally.
Yeah, of course. I was 17 and I'm 22 17. Now.
Okay.
So when I was in 11th grade.
11th grade, okay.
And, you know, I sort of, outside of that and maybe a couple of other friends, I went to a Baptist school, a Baptist private school. So I had to keep it to myself, as well as my sexuality as well.
I can imagine there's quite a lot of pressure there. Yeah,
it was a lot of pressure. It was very tough. And then it got to about New Year's Eve of that year, and I was like, doing what I do on New Year's Eve, just having fun, playing games. And then I was just like, it got really late. And I passed New Year's, it got to probably pretty early morning, so maybe like 2-3 a.m. or something like that. And I was just like, you know what? I was on an adrenaline rush. I was just like, you know what? I'm coming out. am coming out. I wrote this big, long Facebook post for everyone to see. And
Wow.
I don't know how I had that big burst of confidence, but I just did it. And thankfully, the comments at the very least were from my friend group were like super supportive. Thankfully, I mean, there obviously have been some people I've had to cut off from my life since then from high school and other friend groups, but
Yeah.
I think overall it has been pretty supportive from the people I know. Obviously, being a trans Twitch streamer, you got those randoms in Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, that sort of stuff that just attack you for the sake of attacking you. But in terms of people I know personally, it's been generally really supportive, which I'm wholeheartedly grateful for.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, God, I cannot imagine, like you said, the amount of guts that must have taken. Like,
I don't know how I had it. I don't have that much guts these days.
Normally I'd say alcohol, but you know, you were under 18, so of course there was no alcohol at all.
Yes,
a
few months before that. I mean, a few months after that was my first.
Wow. And
but yeah,
that's jumping in at the deep end, and like
it was
the double whammy.
I don't think I think it would have taken a lot longer if I didn't have that burst of adrenaline and confidence and stuff. But I guess in hindsight, I'm mostly glad I did it, and you know, it's made me be able to express myself and be who I want to be for a longer amount of time rather than bottling it up, which is, personally, I find that never good to bottle things up for too long. Otherwise it just ends in disaster. But family-wise, it's taken its time, family. It's been a lot harder family-wise, personally. Thankfully, I haven't been like, you know, you hear these stories about trans youths being like sort of disowned by their family and stuff. Thankfully, none of that's happened to me. My family is still quite around and all that. Like, it's just a matter of those building blocks. And it took a while for me to come out to them. And thankfully, in more recent months, I finally got my mom and one of my sisters at least to start calling me Chloe, which is a big improvement. Like, just growing up, well, not growing up, but like during my teens, I wasn't the type of teen to like ask my parents for anything. I didn't like rejection at all, and I still don't like rejection. So it's like there's a bigger anxiety there at play.
Yeah, I can imagine it's well, I keep saying I can imagine. I don't think I really can imagine just how to even start that conversation, you know.
I don't know. Most of my discussions with parents or family have just sort of happened. I didn't quite initiate it. It just sort of happened.
Yeah, not that let's all sit down at the table. Well, I've got something to tell you. You know, I don't think that
I've never.
Really
that's
happened.
never happened for me. It's never been a big sort of sit down.
That way leads to lots of silence and climbing up all around. I think because nobody really knows where to go from there.
And my mum, at least, is a big 20 questions person. So
yeah,
so is my grandma, actually, now that I think about it. It's her side of the family just love asking questions.
Polite behaviour, but it's good, because without questions, I think, you know, you can just keep making the same mistakes.
That's
true. And like
true.
you said, you know, especially probably knowing, like they said, that you're a person who finds it hard to lead into those, even like you said, from here, just knowing where to start talking, you know, they know that's probably a better way to kind of pull that out of you, is if they kind of ask those leading questions.
Yeah, I agree with that. They have to ask the question, so I won't tell them anything.
No. Okay, so mentally throws out half a dozen questions. Or shall I say, with hindsight, you know, because bearing in mind, like we're old fogies. I am 37. I'm significantly older. There's that D word, older at least, and it wasn't something that was really even in my frame of reference. I had one of my best friends was gay and came out in college, and like that was a thing, but trans wasn't really something I had an experience with. And I remember being in my 21st, he was actually living with somebody who was trans, and the way he tried to explain it wasn't even using that language. And I actually remember, and I feel awful saying this now, I straight up laughed. And he said, this person is a guy who lives like a girl and like has fake breasts on all the time. Was pretty much how he explained it to me. It was something like that. So it's not quite the best explanation.
That's a really bad explanation.
It was a bit confusing. I was just like, okay. And I think it was because he did drag at the time. And so I was kind of thinking of it as like an extension of that.
Yeah, okay.
But, the idea of transness, I guess, didn't really seem to be a thing at that age. So I don't know how kind of aware of it you were when you were growing up. But
I wasn't, actually. I only found out what it is because I used to ice skate a lot with my friends during high school. That was our sort of main hobby. I only really found out what being trans was because myself and a few of our friends met another trans girl when we were ice skating, and then they sort of explained it to me after that, or maybe I just did. I can't remember, it was so long ago. But either just they explained that's who they were, and then maybe I did my own research on after that. So yeah, I knew about like year or so beforehand. Obviously I knew about sexualities and all that, like you said, for you, and then it didn't really come across to me until I met that person. And if I didn't, I'm not sure how long it would have taken until I found out myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of, you heard that, did some research, and you're like, this kind of resonates with you and how you were feeling.
Definitely.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of what I was wondering. So if you look at that in hindsight, do you think kind of if you'd known more about it, or it explained how you felt from a younger age perhaps than 17?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I wish I'd known about it earlier, for sure.
Yeah.
It would have been hard going to a private school, but I feel like
absolutely.
I might have had more time to get more support in high school.
Yeah. Oh, and more time is it's funny you use those words in particular because I've been trying to do kind of a fair bit of reading on this, and it almost seems like the universal way that gender clinics try and look at puberty blockers is in order to give trans youth more time.
Yeah.
Kind of without having the added stress of puberty and maybe having to deal with a body that's changing in ways that feel even more alien than, a cis person might find, to kind of decide what feels right for you.
Yeah, if I could go back and just redo puberty, that would have been fantastic. I like, with the body that I'd like, that'd be so much better than what I ended up with.
It's such a confusing time for anybody. There is so much going on everywhere, and like you said, the effect that the hormones have on you, and I think to have that kind of confusion about your body and how you're feeling about it anyway, even if you don't rise to the level of having gender dysmorphia or gender identity disorder. I apologize if one of these terms is out of date and it's offensive. Like I said, I'm trying to follow what I've read in scientific journals and things, and trying to follow best practice. But general disclaimer, I'm trying not to be offensive. Hand on heart, my sincerest apologies if any of the language that we use in this podcast is offensive to any trans people. And please do let us know. Again, like you said, we can only do our best with trying to educate ourselves, and we can only do better if we're pulled up when we're wrong. And that's where the kind of this argument for puberty blockers comes in. Now, again, I don't want to get into a really big scientific lecture of everybody listening here, but the short version is puberty blockers are a family of drugs that were initially designed to treat what they call precocious puberty, or incredibly early onset puberty, to delay it to time where it might be a slightly less distressing and the child is not willing, more able, I should say, to deal with the changes that are occurring in their body and able to care for themselves through those changes. They also find that it can tend to help stop problematic behaviours that can cause around there, but we don't want to get totally off topic. Off topic.
There we go. Good term.
So these are drugs that have been designed to be used pediatrically. They do also have applications for, obviously, adult populations as well, particularly in treatments of things like hormonal dependent cancers, even things like endometriosis and the like, things that can do issues with reproductive organs and the like, which can be rather painful and problematic. So it's already used over quite a wide age range here. So using it on people in early stages of puberty, and even occasionally prepubescently, isn't hugely different from what these were originally designed to do. So we'll just that is a fact. We'll just get this one out.
Yeah.
We try and
go for it.
I'm trying to kind of rather how to get on here. So we're not arguing, are they safe to use? They are. There are some potential long-term side effects, some issues with bone density, but which can be treated. We're not talking about any long-term harmful effects, and we're not talking about anything which can't be undone. This is used to postpone, shall we say, puberty for people who are experiencing it at an age where they're generally not psychologically prepared to. That is its intended use. So I think that pretty much covers everything. Psychologically, physically, that's what it's designed for. If we're going, this is why they went into a lab and designed these drugs.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's a lot of science behind it. And I mean, I just feel like there's really no need to put these restrictions on them when these youths are pretty much using them what they were made for in the first place, just for a slightly different use. Yeah. And it's just, I had to call stereotypes there, but it's very stereotypical of America to do something like this.
Yeah.
Especially it's not all of America, mind you, it's just these specific states, and those specific states are just living up to their stereotypes. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the president signed into law protections, which about a dozen or so states have now tried to go around by forming their own laws. Even in one particular state, going so far as to override the governor vetoing the bill.
I think that was Alabama. I could be wrong.
Arkansas, I think, but either way, it began with an A. Sorry to one of
those.
I think it was Arkansas. So I had to look over. And just for the sake of fairness, the governor is a Republican. I'm just going to say that. Republican, therefore somebody who's considered normally more conservative, still vetoed outlawing this.
Yeah, and then they're just like, nah, we want to do our own thing. Let's just override a veto.
Yeah, overrode the governor's veto.
Just ridiculous. Like, that's not how politics work.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'd like to think so. It's all a bit confusing.
In theory, that's how it should work.
And the reason why I kind of wanted to make a point about that is a lot of people are calling this experimental treatment and experimenting on our kids. And really it hasn't. It's been used since the 80s and it's been used since the 90s in transgender treatment. So that's 30 years ago.
That's a long experimenting time.
Yeah. Obviously, one, because it's very hard to do studies on children. And generally, pediatric studies, from what I read today, aren't very commonly done anyway. So off-book uses, which is to say, children's drugs being used for something other than their initially defined treatment, is something that happens quite often because
all the time
drug trials on kids aren't done often. Yeah. And that's fair enough. And they said, especially for something like this, because how can you have a placebo of something stopping puberty? Guys, something tells me I think I may not have gotten the real drug here. Well, what was your first hint? Well, there was two of them. So they said, you can't really have a blind study of something like this.
No, you can't, not at all.
Yeah. Because the trans segment of the population isn't huge, you can't really do big studies. So they're small sample sizes.
Not at all.
So that is why they can't always do big governmental studies. And that's one of the other arguments people have against this. So we're trying to, knock these straw men down, as it were. And that's fair enough. And we have lots of things. To look at it right now, how many vaccines do we have going on right now that don't have long-term trials? This does happen. People could say, obviously, well, one's life-threatening and one's not.
Yeah.
Rates of suicide could disagree with you there. But I'm trying to make a rational argument here and not be massively emotional about things. Like somebody said, saying that not giving somebody, puberty blockers is murder, is kind of a bit strong. I don't want to quite go that far.
A little bit over dramatic there.
Yeah. But suffice to say something, because I've just totally forgotten the point I was trying to make.
Happens all the time. Happens to the best of us.
Things. Okay. I'm trying to gradually cycle my way around to the UK decision that was made the end of last year. I don't know if you heard about this one.
Please remind me.
There was a court case brought against the gender identity something. Basically, there's one gender identity clinic in the UK.
Okay. No, I don't think I heard about this.
A court case was brought against them by two people. One was the mother of a 15-year-old autistic girl who was on a waiting list to see this clinic. I don't know whether when they say girl, it was girl from birth or she identified and was a trans female. I can't comment as to that. So it was her mother and a 23-year-old woman who had been a client of the clinic, had transitioned and had made the choice to detransition.
Okay, I heard about that second one actually.
Yeah, they were two plaintiffs. It was a joint case from the two of them.
Yeah.
And the core of her case was the clinic didn't push her hard enough to make sure that she really wanted to transition. And that she was given puberty blockers at 16, at 17 started hormone treatment, at 20 decided to have a double mastectomy. And at some time between 20 and 23, decided to detransition. And in the words of her statement, I don't know if I can find it exactly, so I'm going to paraphrase, sorry. I've done a lot of reading on my phone today, unfortunately, so they're on there, but it's trying to send through them all. I thought becoming a man would make me happy, and it didn't. And that, it sounds to me like, and again, this is where I kind of go on to opinion. It sounds to me that somebody who suffered from depression, part of which may have been over her gender identity and how she felt about that, but she somehow felt that transitioning was a magic wand. And at some point decided that it wasn't, and so changed her mind.
I think that's a valid opinion, to be honest. Like, I feel like she probably just thought it'd be like sort of this like miracle that would like solve all her problems. Yeah. In a sense.
Like, yeah. If only I won the lottery, or if only I was a size 8, life would be grand. You know. And so they took this clinic to court successfully.
Really? Okay.
Successfully. They won. And the court's opinion, which is now binding, and again, without trying to get into too much legal depth, the age of consent in the UK is 16, to give you an idea. You can buy lottery tickets, you can have sex, etc. at 16. At 18, you can drink, you can vote, and do all the rest. Usually at age 16 is when you have majority, or in terms of legal decisions. Legal decisions, medical decisions. So, say I'm 16 and I want to go on the pill, but I don't want my parents to know. In the UK, I can go to my GP and say, I want to go on the pill because I'm 16. And that's okay, that's what I want, that's my, desire, so long as there's nothing, that's going to harm me, they do that, and they can't legally tell my parents.
Yeah, okay.
Because
I think
have
that's
medical
similar
autonomy.
here too, yeah.
Yeah. This particular case has said under 16s can't give informed consent. And this confused me at first, because I was like, well, surely if under 16 you would have your parents giving consent anyway. But they have something that basically says under the age of 16, if somebody is mentally competent to understand what they're going through, they can give consent without their parents. Okay, and it's got a special term. It's a GnRH consent.
That is like a bit of a loophole.
It is.
That's really interesting.
Say, for example, a child born to Jehovah's Witnesses would like to have a blood transfusion because they don't identify as Jehovah's Witness, and they are 14. Their parents should have legal autonomy over them. But if they say, well, I understand that, I understand that that's their religious preference, I don't identify that, I understand that I need or it would be greatly beneficial to have this, I can understand what the risks are of having this blood transfusion, that I might get some odd type of bloodborne disease or whatever. And it's quite obvious that they know what they're talking about and can make the decision. They can be considered competent for that. Again, I'm not a lawyer here. This is just from what I've been able to tell.
In that case, that's totally fair. I mean,
So that kind of thing. Apparently, the clinic were using this standard for some people under the age of 16, so 14 or 15-year-olds, to give consent to have puberty blockers.
Yeah.
The court case said, no, can't have it. Anybody under the age of 16 who wants it has to go to court. Can only be done by a court order. So they had all these people who were under 16 who were on it, even if, from what I can understand, even if their parents had consented, suddenly had issues. Because this one person who had detransitioned and said they didn't try hard enough to dissuade me, and this one woman who said, I'm worried, what if my daughter changes her mind? What if she gets it wrong?
Okay.
So because one person had decided to detransition and one person said, my daughter may regret it, it's now illegal for everybody under the age of 16. Which obviously, as you said yourself, would obviously, before that age, find it quite beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's not even like specific, those like cases you see where it's just one or two people ruins it all. It happens in so many different court cases, in lawsuits, where they've had to shut restaurants down due to like one issue or something like that. It happens all the time. And I think it's just really bad and like really shitty that no one gets this just because one person had a bad experience in their opinion, and one person's mother, rather, not that person specifically. If it was that 15-year-old that was just like, that may or may not have changed her mind, then that would be a totally different story. But it was their mother, who can't entirely speak for their kid, saying that they may regret it. And it's just really, really unfortunate, because to go to court, there's a lot of legal fees, a lot of messy paperwork that really doesn't need to be done.
Yeah.
And it's just like a way longer and annoying process. And I've seen like all these different cases because they've had to go to court or go through these long waiting lists, that it's like severely affected their mental health and all that. And it's just, it's really unfortunate that all these government bodies or the courts or whatever have just like said no, when it literally could cause the deaths of these youths as well.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so messy.
Getting back to you for a second and kind of
go for it.
Putting our human face on this, for example. So, as you obviously, because of your, did you try at all to see if there was any kind of medication, or was this just again something that you had no clue about when you kind of went through this age?
Yeah, I had to, like read on Reddit and various other resources about it. Like I had no idea about it. And because as I said earlier about like talking, I didn't have like, because I was obviously still living with my parents, things had to go through them, as their roof and all that. And also going to private school, it's just like, there wasn't a really like area that I could go where I just had to research and just fantasize, really.
Yeah.
I couldn't like specifically go out and do anything.
Yeah. One, you felt you had to kind of, there was this pressure almost to hide it, but you also found that it was hard to find literature and things available. It was kind of what you could do on your own.
Yeah. And it was hard for me to like ask questions and all that. So I was very much like, and I didn't know many trans people back then. I know so many nowadays, but like back then it was like one or two people, and like they've had their own different experiences and stuff. So I'm just like, well, maybe I'll have my own experience. So I guess I better do my own research.
Yeah. So Leah's asked, in your opinion, how much do you think is a matter of parental control over trans kids versus actual concern over the impact of the medications?
That's a really good question, to be honest. I think I think depending on the country, and like America, I feel like it's very, depending on the states, again, it's very parental control. but maybe in other countries it could also be genuine concern. I think it's more of an individual parent versus child case by case basis, because the parent could be lovely, they could have genuine concern over them, and like my mum specifically has had potential concern over it, and I've explained it to her, and now she's like totally fine with it. But on the other hand, it could be just parents being like, my house, my rules, you do what I say or you get kicked out or something like that. I feel like it could go either way on a case-by-case basis.
What, if you don't mind me asking you to elaborate on that, what kind of concerns did she have? Can you remember any offhand? Was it again the what if it's a phase? What if you're wrong?
Yeah, it was the whole phase thing. It was the phase thing, and like, are you doing it this because this person is doing it or something like that? But
if someone jumped off a cliff, would you do it?
Yeah, something for lack of a better analogy. Yeah, pretty much that. Yeah. And it was like I went out of my way to specifically like stop her from thinking like it was just a phase sort of thing. After a while, because and then I did explain to her that it wasn't a phase and this is who I wanted to be, and it was with my mum at the very least, it was definitely a step-by-step process, because I consider I consider myself like not really the black sheep of the family, but I was always like, I have two elder sisters and they're very like, how do I put this? I'm not quite sure how to put this. I'm fairly different to them in some senses. And it's like, I guess my parents would expect me to just turn out like my sisters. And I wouldn't say I'm the black sheep, but I'd say I'm different enough from the rest of my family that I have mostly different interests and all that.
I mean, we could argue that you have actually turned out exactly like your sisters.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying that, I was just like, well, turns out I just need a physiotherapy degree and then I'll be set. Both my sisters work in physiotherapy, so... following in the footsteps. But yeah, no, when I said that, I was just like, hold on, this can be taken in that way. And but yeah, it was
you tend to be a bit irreverent at times.
That's okay.
But
yeah, it was definitely like genuine concern for my mum at the very least.
And again, I suppose it's going to the different generational views on things and how we tend to say gender is a social construct these days. What would be so wrong if it was just a phase? If you decided tomorrow that actually maybe Chloe wasn't how you felt was best representative of yourself. Maybe it would be being, what's the word I'm looking for? Representing isn't it? If you decided to detransition, I'll say that because I can't think of not representing, presenting. For lack of a better term. Or XAE21, exactly. Or if you decided to be non-binary, how does that invalidate the last, 3 years, 5 years to a greater or lesser extent that you've been Chloe? Where
exactly.
You haven't been able to be that openly to everybody. But even if somebody does decide to detransition, how does that make transitioning wrong?
It doesn't at all. Like, I mean, that's...
Exactly. As Lee's just written, we're allowed to quit our jobs. Why not gender? Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just, if they choose to detransition, it's their choice. They need to live with that decision, no matter what sort of costs it may or may not incur, and if it's their choice, they need to be prepared to be able to deal or fight whatever battle they may be going through, whether it be physically or mentally or whatever. I just don't think because someone's decided to do that, they should turn around and be like, well, it's the clinic's fault that they didn't dissuade me, or they didn't tell me, are you sure? Are you really sure about this?
Okay, so
keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Keep it to yourself or your support groups or whatever. Just don't bring clinics that could potentially help youths that really do need this.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like the American style of litigiousness. I was going to get a sandwich, and so I got a meatball sub from Subway, and then when I got home, I realised that I actually wanted a tuna melt, so I'm suing Subway.
That's a really good analogy. I agree with that, yeah.
But, we don't know how many hoops there are to jump through. We don't know. We do know there's currently a 2-year plus waiting period, which in itself you could call a cool down period. That's currently the wait system to get into this one clinic in the UK. And you have raised one point, though. There is, of course, at some point in time, there can be a point where changes become permanent, at least to an extent. Puberty blockers aren't there, though. This is an effect that when you're on them, they stop this process from happening. You come off them, the process resumes. About the only permanent issue it can have is if you go on and have other treatment.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling of double standard. If I went and got breast implants tomorrow and then 6 months later decided, actually now I feel they're too big and took them out, nobody would blink twice. My body, my choice.
Not at all.
If a trans person did it, and I don't want to say you because I don't want to keep projecting onto you, and said, okay, I feel like I want to live my life as Marie, and I'm going to get breast implants as gender affirmation surgery, and a year later decided, okay, I'm going to detransition, going to go back to living as Mark and remove them. Why is that different? Why is one seeming to be, this is long-term harm, whereas another one is my choice?
Yeah,
I've legally changed my name. I go by, Anna and things on the internet. It's not my real name. Lots of people mispronounce my real name, so I don't use it. Lots of people have legally changed their name, even if they haven't done it to change their gender identity. So why
exactly
does
and
that
it shouldn't
seem
be any
to
different.
Frame the whole thing in a different perspective?
And it shouldn't at all.
Yeah.
I just don't know why. Like, some people are like this. Like, it's hard to say. It's honestly hard to say why people are like this. You can't. Some part of you wishes you could jump into their mindset and just be like, why did this person make this decision that had all these ramifications?
Yeah.
And
but, just not even taking away this particular, legal case.
Yeah.
It's just trying to understand in today's society where, we have, I'm sitting here with green hair, other people have multiple facial piercings, we have scarification, we have such a huge amount of body modification which is not blinked at. And have people who do large amounts of cosmetic surgery alterations to themselves. Why does there seem to be this double standard? To, again, things that, and I understand to a point things can be, well, they say irreversible. Yes, it can.
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
Lower half gender affirmation stuff is fairly point of no return, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And I mean, that's it. Personally, I feel like that should be your last sort of step of transition, because that's also, well, not coincidentally, but like it's the highest costing part of transition. So I feel like obviously I can't speak for everyone's journey, but I feel like the trans people, whether trans guy or trans girl, I feel like that should be their final step, personally. And obviously it's up to them what they do, but as someone who doesn't have a lot of money, it's just like, you know, do it step by step. Don't jump into things.
Okay, so we've said that all this surgery that people say, you know, is permanent stuff. And okay, so certain parts, okay, we've accepted are. What if we flip the argument the other way? Puberty is permanent. For you, for example, you had to go through puberty because of lack of knowledge and chance.
And I was like 11 or 12 or something like that. So, I was just finishing primary school, so... Yeah. Too busy playing, like, online games. RuneScape.
Do you have an idea, or can you kind of ballpark roughly, if you were going to have gender affirmation surgery to, and people probably aren't going to like my choice of words here, correct the effect of puberty, what would that be? Or you know, even just off the top of your head, thinking of some of the things, you know, I'm not talking breast implants, because obviously puberty didn't take them away, you know, so things like perhaps facial feminization surgery, which I know is a whole collection of terms. That's probably the one that hugely springs to my mind. But what's kind of the big things that you think would, at least for you, for yourself, if somebody kind of said, you know, cost and everything, no object, what do you feel that puberty did that you would like to undo?
Okay.
Just to try and get a bit of an idea here.
Yeah. So probably you bring. I agree with your point about like facial like feminization, and that would have been good to have. I'm like okay with my face personally. I think it's fine. It's just I got caught with my dad's genes of facial hair, and I see a lot of other, you know, not just trans people too, just like cis people. Or like cis guys, for example, I know a few that just don't grow facial hair, and I'm just like, here, do you want mine? Let me just rip it off for you. And it's just like, that's one of my biggest ones, like, because my facial hair does tend to grow back quite fast.
Yeah.
And it also grows on my chest and stomach too, and it's just... And my legs, it's just a lot of effort to go to, with like mental health issues as well, to like take care of your own body, which is why I don't shave my legs that often, because it is a lot of work. My legs are a fair bit hairy, and it's like, you know, I wear long clothes a lot, so it's just like I don't have too many opportunities where I am able to shave my legs. My face I do every few days. My chest and stomach I do every now and again, because like, you know, only my partner's gonna see that, so it's not a big deal. The other main thing for puberty, and it annoys me a bit when people are just like, oh, you know, you have a great voice and stuff, and it's just like, well, no, this is puberty talking here. I didn't looking back at it on hindsight, I wish I had a higher pitch voice and a more feminine voice, and also voice training as well, that I do want to do eventually, is also work too. And I'm not saying like, oh, you know, I don't want to go, I'm lazy, I don't want to do this work that needs to go in. I get the like work that needs to be done. It's just like mental health issues play a big part in my motivation of doing that. Like in my head, I'm just like, 100%, I want to do that. But it's taking that extra step to get there. I'm trying to think what else I could have undone. Yeah, definitely hair growth, voice.
Yeah.
I'm actually okay with like my height,
Mm-hmm.
and I know a few. Well, not personally, no, but I know. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day. She was mentioning she had a trans friend who was worried like that they were too tall, and it's just like, for me personally, it's, well, height is a puberty thing. I don't think that should affect. Some people do judge by height, and I think that's a really shitty thing to judge people on. But I don't think it should affect someone's view of you. Height is just, it doesn't affect whether you're trans, non-binary, or cis or whatever. It's just like how tall you are. And, I'm 5'8", 5'9"-ish, and I'm pretty okay with it. Maybe I wish I was a little shorter, but I like being able to reach for things sometimes.
Absolutely.
So, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I definitely have undone. I'm not too sure, actually.
Sorry, I didn't mean to kind of throw this at you, but it's just, it seems to be, everyone's like, oh, there's these changes, or, these things you can't change, and that's fine if that's all there is. It's just kind of turning the argument around, like I said, people saying all these things that are permanent changes, and like we said, what we're talking about in essence isn't permanent, but puberty is.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, it's got those things which can give you things that either, like you said, are things that you have to either, whether it's through shaving yourself or through, options like laser removal, it's time, it's effort, it's money.
It's money too. It's money too. So much money.
It all is. Which comes to that. So that was the main point that I wanted. Two more points that I want to get to. One's Lee's, one's other, and I read something, and it kind of made me think. And it was somebody talking about people who recommend seeing psychiatrists or psychologists to try and, I think they said the words of, be happy the gender you are.
Ugh.
Rather than going through this transition. And they likened that to people who are homosexual going to conversion therapy.
Yeah.
They said it's kind of the same thing for trans people being told to go see a psychologist to be happy the gender you were born. What are your takes on that? Do you think there's an equation there? Do you think it's kind of trying to force yourself to be somebody you aren't, or do you think that it can be, a valid thing to see where your thought is, or what? Because it struck me as strong wording, but I don't know if it's kind of out of place to actually say so. Like if you're saying this is the only option you have.
Yeah, I think them saying that is like a really, really terrible thing, and can 100% affect someone's mental health quite a lot, especially if they are forcing someone to be who they aren't or who they don't want to be. And I feel like when you're transitioning, and sometimes people do go see psychologists or psychiatrists, but I feel like the best time to do that, if you are going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist or whatever, is just to talk things out. Don't let them force their views, or what you were talking about them saying to be happy with the gender that you are.
Yeah.
I feel like if you aren't so certain of who you want to be, or you're gender curious or gender fluid or something like that, and you want to talk things out, then that's perfectly fine. And even some even GPs, or if you do go to what's the right word, one of these gender clinics or whatever, and they recommend a psychiatrist or psychologist to do, that's perfectly normal, and that's quite healthy to do, because, you know, if you aren't too sure, you can be quite confused and you might not have anyone to turn to. But in saying that, these people that are saying, you know, go to psychiatrists or psychologists so you can be, like, happy the gender that you are, is a really, really terrible thing, and it shouldn't be done at all. And it's just absolutely rubbish. These mental health or psychiatrists and psychologists do have their place in the transitional period, but that isn't it.
Yeah. Like I said, there's, you know, therapy can be a great tool. And like you said, especially for people who are, you know, whether or not you actually do suffer from gender identity disorder, or I think gender dysphoria.
Yeah, it's a more common way nowadays.
You know, whichever identity you feel is right for you, whether it's a permanent thing or at that time. And not everyone who is trans does suffer from gender dysphoria. So if you do, if you don't, if you had questions, like you said, therapy can be a valuable tool. I don't want anybody to think that we're invalidating the role of therapists at all. But it's just, like I said, being told, go to a therapist to be happy the gender you were born. Being told that, they said, is like the trans version of, like they said, conversion therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually a really strong statement, and not something that I'd personally thought about. But again, it's one of these things, like you said, for a lot of people say, oh, it's just a phase, you know, go talk, they'll talk you out of it. You know, please don't feel like you have to do that. Please. Anybody, don't ever feel like you have to hide who you are to fit into society.
Exactly,
and feel that.
yeah.
I know there's a lot of pressure there, and
be your best self.
Rather a huge amount of people have at some point felt like they've detransitioned, or like yourself, feel like you kind of had to hide your transition because of outside pressures, or to feel safe, or to be safe. And that's really unfortunate. But don't feel like there's something wrong with you when you have to be forced into that. Please, if you take nothing away from that podcast, take away this. Now, because I felt like I've been ignoringly, and I haven't, of course. And again, it's a very, very good question. I said it's a slight tangent, but what do you think about the laser focus on trans women in regards to trans issues? While trans men seem to fly under the radar a lot, said, is the same kind of environment surrounding them? Is it partly a sexism comment too? And I know this kind of J.K. Rowling, you know, and they've said a lot of it in media that, and when I say media, I mean, you know, popular media, as in films and things, that they said, you know, it always seems to be kind of this kind of serial killer or something who kind of, you know, as a quirk, or as, you know, like oh, this is how I, you know, find my victims, or, you know, it's shown almost like part of this, you know, like mental disease that's wrong with them, that they cross-dress or that they present as trans. And it's really quite harmful, but it doesn't really seem to come across the other way. And in fact, the only movie I can think about it off the top of my head, and I can't think of the name of it, male actor presented as a female, and it was, you know, supposed to be done very sensitively. But yeah, how do you feel about that, and the whole, you know, that trans women, there seems to be this fear or this presentation that they're secretly just deranged male predators, you know, or they're, you know, they're trying to cheat at sports. So, which is another thing that's done, is they've been, you know, from a lot of college sports
so
teams, they've been told they can only do it with their gender assigned at birth. You know,
it's
kind of.
So I've got
Yeah, I mean, how do you not let that get to you, or how do you try and deal with that? So, short of saying, you know, well, why don't you do it to them as well? You know, because that's not really fair either. But why do you think that it seems to be focused so much to one side of the trans community rather than the other?
I don't know, like, that's a really good question because, like, I personally haven't really thought about that all that much. And it's like, when I saw the question, I was just like, huh, that is actually really true. And funnily enough, I don't know too many trans guys personally. I only know the few. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's like a trans female to trans guy ratio or anything. It's just like, I feel like trans women are more, what's the right word? English is a hard language.
It's getting late for all of us. They do definitely seem to be demonized more, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know why either. Like, there definitely would be the same kind of environment around it with their own pressures and own sort of battles. But I feel like it's like kind of the, you know, the sort of intertwining circle charts. I forgot what they're called that you're doing. Similarity and differences chart. Venn diagrams, exactly. There's like, you have their similarities in their struggles and their environments, but there's also different ones as well. And it's just like, it's hard to put this without sounding like one-sided because I'm not. But as a trans woman, I feel like our issues are a lot harder. Well, not a lot harder, but different to deal with. Because if a trans guy is like, how do I put this? If a cis woman is starting to identify as a guy, you know, they could be called out as like a tomboy or something like that, which is like a more accepted sort of thing, rather than a sort of cis guy like starting to identify as girl. It's a little bit more accepted, I feel like, for trans guys.
I think what we're trying to say is, it's not like, for example, nobody says trans men are really just women who want to peek at men's penises in bathrooms, you know, whereas, yeah, I just said that, you know, and it is literally, I've never actually read the article, but I know it was one of the, you know, and it's an argument that's often used against trans people using bathrooms for the gender that they, you know, present as, is, oh, well, they're not really, that's inappropriate, you know, or they're trying to, you know, it makes them sound like predators. And whether this...
I agree with what Lee said, yeah. It's, you don't hear about guys' bathrooms being policed all that much.
Yeah.
And which brings me back to, like, you don't hear about trans guys much in popular media. Or in, like, media in general. And it's just like, I don't really have a good specific reason why there's a laser focus on trans women. It's just how it is for whatever reason. There could be many different factors at plays. Like the bathroom policing. It's more so the women's bathroom.
It just... It kind of seems unfortunate that women seem to fight so hard for equality. Why not be on the side of trans women as well, rather than alienating them? And, you know, they're not the enemy. They are women as well. You know, and it's just, I don't know, because it does seem, and again, could be my own perception bias, it seems to be a lot of women who do this kind of, you know, put forward this hostility towards it that I see. You know, you hear about it a bit in sport, and that can seem to be a bit more level, but I understand that women have to be very aware of their safety, but it seems to be frightened of a boogeyman that doesn't exist. And like I said, I don't know whether it is the way that this constant portrayal in, like we said, movies and popular culture seems to be, you know, like the first one that came into Lee's mind was the original, actually I think it was the prequel, it was Red Dragon, wasn't it? Ralph Fiennes, who was, you know, dressing in drag and things like this. And like I said, it seems to be this common portrayal is it's like, you know, it's part of this mental disorder of this deranged killer, and it's they seem to, like, you know, crazy person dresses like woman. Why does that equal trans people are dangerous? You know,
exactly.
One, it's a horrific stereotype anyway.
It is, and it's like a 1 in very high billion numbers.
Yeah. You know,
it, like, never happens.
I don't know, and that's another huge, you know, tangent to get off with. I get off onto. Rather, I don't know if there's ever been a trans serial killer outside of, you know, people's obviously very strange imaginations. But no, it's just, where does this bias come from? You know, and sadly,
no idea. I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. It's just how the cookie crumbles.
Unfortunately. Welcome to being women, yes.
Yep, pretty much.
Yes. Unfortunately, women target women can happen across all demographics.
All sorts, all sorts of people, places, things.
Right. I think that's that's a really unfortunate down note that we don't want to end on. Is there anything kind of in summation that you would like to say, or anything that you felt that hasn't been covered that you were hoping to get to tonight?
I'm not sure if I've had... It is getting quite late. I'm not sure if I have anything specifically, any other topics to bring up. I just think, try and end on a positive note. Here we go. Be who you want to be. Make your own decisions and live. I was trying to be all inspirational and I lost my train of thought. Brilliant. If you're going to make life-changing decisions, be prepared to live with those decisions. And even if you may regret those decisions later, life is one big learning experience. And, you know, if you do feel like you need to start these puberty blockers early on, go for it. Absolutely go for it if you can. Like, I don't believe they should be banned at all anywhere in the world. I feel like there should be access, and that's what they were originally intended for, to stop puberty for those who weren't quite ready. You know, I believe in you, all trans people out there. Be excellent to each other and party on. There we go. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to.
Absolutely. You know, don't see any reason, like we said, we are totally 100%, well, we're 100% in agreement with 90% of our poll.
Yeah, and don't listen to the media at all.
Absolutely. It's so hard to try and find unbiased media, and
especially the Murdoch press.
Yeah, because we do know that we are left-leaning, and because we couldn't get anything. You know, I did try and throw myself down the rabbit hole, and I was trying to find, you know, what the kind of the counter argument was. And like I said, it's very hard to find, rather than men are men and women are women, you know. But like we said, we've realised that gender is so much a social construct. It's those boxes to put, you know, people into. This is what acceptable behaviour should be. But the concept of people who are trans have actually been around for an incredibly long time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I can't remember now where I read this, and I read it years ago, and it stuck in my head because it was such a beautiful way of expressing it. I thought Native American people referred to people who were trans as two souls because they thought they had a male and a female soul. And so they felt like they had this kind of, they almost had this, you know, this extra.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I just thought it almost hints at that conflict that you can have, and that duality of nature. But they didn't see anything wrong with it. You know, they had like the kind of the soul for the representation of like the physical body, and then the soul for the representation of how the person felt they presented, and it kind of covered both. And I thought that was, you know, a really beautiful concept. Now that's several hundred years ago, you know.
Yeah.
People feeling these things aren't new. How we see them and how we accept them and what we can do about it in the case of things like puberty blockers and things have of course changed, and that will always change and evolve. And I think anything that gives people a chance to explore safely, you know, in a way that's not going to damage their bodies or damage them psychologically, that they can explore this and do the work and understand what is the best way for themselves to move forward, has got to be a good thing, you know. And I suppose that's my quote-unquote hot take. Lee would like to say that trans men are men, trans women are women, non-binary people are awesome. And people who find themselves somewhere else on that gender fluid spectrum, we love you too. You know?
Heck yeah.
People are people.
People are people.
Absolutely. So thank you all for listening to us once again. Dawn, Chloe, 30-second sellout time. Where can we find you?
All right, let's do it. Okay, you can find me on Twitter, shitposting about a bunch of esportsy stuff, VTuber stuff, among many other things. You can find me there at DF Retro. You can find me on Twitch, where I'm finally coming back to streaming after a little bit of a break, playing Sims, League, bunch of variety stuff. You can find me on Twitch at Dawnfire. If you're so inclined to watch my really bad YouTube videos, you can check them out. Lightbytes, BYTES, and on Instagram at DawnfireTV. And if you're so inclined to listen to my radio shows, you can catch me on Eclipse Radio on the TuneIn app on Mondays and Thursdays starting from later this month. Man, that was a really fast sellout.
I'm impressed. About the only thing you missed was listen out for wherever she's shoutcasting at RF lands.
Yeah, true. Well, RF land got cancelled, so won't be another for a little bit.
I know.
Coming soon.
It's unfortunate.
Next RF land or any online event that I may be casting. Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe there's somebody in Twitch Perth who wants to have a chat to you about that. Sorry, Stream Perth, whatever we're calling it this week, because they keep changing the guidelines on us. As always,
Twitch.
Our wonderful co-host on One Life Zero continues. You can find him on Twitch, on Twitter, on pillows, t-shirts, and other merch where he's sold out to. So he will be joining us next time. And of course me at Analog Gaming on the Twitters and the Twitch. I will be on Twitch again, I promise. Life has been happening and stuff as it is. And of course, the podcast itself. If you haven't yet, at Peeves Q's Pod, follow us there on Twitter. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and all those places where you find podcasts.
So many.
Where you find good podcasts.
Yeah, all the good podcasts.
Yeah. If it's somewhere where you find rubbish podcasts, you won't find us there. Yeah. If we're not here on Monday, well, sorry, it's all Lee's fault. See, and I've just figured it out. He was saying, brilliant. Honestly, it's a bit shorter for me to have to do this week because there's 3 different tracks for us to edit. And so that's the real reason why he hasn't recorded with us today. We will help train you to do these intros and extras. No. So if we are late this time, we do apologise. We have recorded a bit later, and will be around and hopefully back on track for our normal schedule, but just having to obviously liaise for the three of us. We were a bit later this time and we were a bit later than Pride, but like I said, thank you very much for joining us, Chloe. We do very much appreciate it. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you here. See, I can sound professional when I really, really try hard. So at least my mum tells me I'm special. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. We will catch you next time. Until then, we've been Peeves and Qs. You've been awesome.